partner, we want to invite you to come to that class and find out what a partner is, why you should be one, and what it takes to become one. So that's tonight at 6 p.m. If you're not a partner, please come out and join us for that class. All right, well, we are in this sermon series called New Stories, New Perspectives, and that is to say new from the Gospel of Matthew. We went through Matthew with some detail, and now we're looking at stories that were not in the Gospel of Matthew, but are in other Gospels. And today will be the final sermon in this series before we pivot into April and head towards Easter. You already heard what it's about. It's Luke chapter 10, and it's the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan, if it's not the most popular, it's close. I talked about the prodigal son last week. I said that's probably the most well-known sermon, one of the most well-loved. If that's not first, this one is, the parable of the Good Samaritan. And because you just heard the story, I don't need to set up much of it. I'm just going to jump right into the scriptures. So this is what it says, starting at verse 25 of chapter 10. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Now, I'm just going to take it one chunk at a time, one piece at a time, so I'm going to stop here and just point out a few things. The one thing I want to make clear is it says expert in the law. Some translations say lawyer. So I may say lawyer as I go. That's what I mean by lawyer is the expert in the law. It's the same person. So this lawyer stood up to test Jesus. And often when we see that word test, we think he had some kind of negative connotation attached to the question he asked. And that could be his case was to try to make Jesus look bad, or possibly make himself look good. Maybe he wanted to get something from this interaction to make him look good. That could be it, but we don't know for sure because the other details here make it seem as though perhaps his intentions were good. It said that he stood up, meaning he had previously been seated. So being seated would have meant that he put himself in the position of a learner or a disciple. He was seated at Jesus' feet. He was listening. It also says that he stood up, meaning that was a sign of respect or honor, and he addressed Jesus as teacher. So these are all signs that he was honoring Jesus, and perhaps he was there for the right reasons, and he actually did want to learn from Jesus. So which one was it? Was it negative? Was it positive? Was it a little bit of both? I don't know. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that we have the same situation every time we approach Jesus. Why are we going to him? Is it because we truly want to learn and grow and be challenged by him and his words? Or do we want something from him? Do we just want to look good? Do we want to feel good about what maybe the interaction will leave us with? We have that same opportunity every time we approach him, and our attitude really matters. So we're talking about this very common parable. And to be honest, I didn't really want to preach on this parable. I came across it a few weeks ago and thought that could be an option, but I didn't really want to do it. And I kept searching for other things, but ultimately I came back to this. I think the Lord led me here. But the reason I don't want to preach this or any common passage, I have in my mind this idea of I don't want to preach the most common stories because what am I going to say that you haven't already heard? You know what I mean? I'm not that insightful. Anything I say, you've probably already heard, especially on a common passage like this. But the truth is that could be said of any sermon that I preach. Preaching has been happening for about 2,000 years by thousands of ministers all over the world. So if I say it, it's already been said. But nevertheless, I have this thought. I don't want to preach a common passage because you've already heard it. But then what I heard is the Holy Spirit say, you let me worry about that. So I'm not worried about what I'm saying. What I want you to hear is his words. And our attitude when we meet with Jesus will determine how we receive what he wants to say. So I want you to keep that in mind. And my prayer is that you would hear from him. And that's my prayer every Sunday, that it's not me that you hear, that it's him. So let's keep going. The question was, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus responds in verse 26. He says, what is written in the law? How do you read it? And I love this question. This is separate from the rest of the sermon, But it's a really valuable lesson that we can learn in and of itself. Jesus answers with a question. That's a valuable tool that we can utilize in our communication with other people, whether it's a hostile interaction or a friendly interaction. Asking questions is valuable. And by asking the question, Jesus controls the flow of the conversation. He gains insight and understanding of where this person's coming from, what his intentions are in asking the question, what his understanding is, and helps guide the conversation towards a conclusion. So that's important. That's a lesson that we can learn standalone, just a little bonus thing there. But here's what he does. He refers the lawyer to the law. He says, what does the law say? You're a lawyer. He says, how do you read it? What's your opinion? And here's the answer. He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself. You have answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this and you will live. Now, I think the answer the lawyer gives is truly insightful. It really reveals his understanding of the depth of the law. This answer that the lawyer gave is the same answer that Jesus gave. That was pretty insightful. So either he came to this conclusion on his own, which is possible, or he had already heard Jesus say it somewhere else. Jesus maybe already said it. Maybe he heard that that's what Jesus said. And so he wanted to know more. He was curious. He was hungry. And that's another question that we can ask ourselves. Are we satisfied with what we know, or are we interested in going deeper? Are we interested in further revelation of what we might have already understood? The lawyer wanted to know more. He wanted more clarity. See, lawyers, they want laws and rules. That's what they want. And so that's why he wanted more clarity. He said, I need to know, what does it actually mean? Tell me more. And so Jesus here tells him more. Hold on, I missed a slide. Okay, so let's just keep going. Verse 29. So it says, but he wanted to justify himself. This is the lawyer. So he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? So here, I think, is where we see the essence of the story being revealed. The lawyer wants to justify himself. Justification for a lawyer is kind of their job. So he's really interested in this. He wants to justify his own actions. You know, growing up, we used to hear a lot of jokes about lawyers. That was always an easy punchline. I don't hear a lot of lawyer jokes anymore, but that was always a common joke. But the truth is, lawyers aren't the only ones who want to justify themselves. I think we all do. We all want to justify ourselves. We just want to know what to do, and what to do is not found in the law, it's found in love. And so the neighbor is the man is wrestling with this. And so you and I, we might not be guilty of asking that question, who is my neighbor? But we often want to justify ourselves. And is there anything wrong with justifying ourselves? I think there are certain situations that we need to justify our actions, our words. We need to defend ourselves. There are times and places for that. But I think very often, so very often, when we justify ourselves or feel the need to justify ourselves, we're inherently admitting that we were wrong. We're inherently admitting that we didn't do what we knew we were supposed to do. And I think that's what the lawyer is actually revealing in this question, who's my neighbor? Because he knew what the law said, and now he knows he didn't do what he was supposed to do, so he's trying to find justification for his actions. Nobody likes to be wrong. You don't like to be wrong, and I don't like to be wrong. So what do? We try to justify ourselves. The question sometimes can be, when is enough enough? When have I done enough? I think that may have been at the heart of what the lawyer was trying to get at. When have I done enough? What has happened? What do I need to do? But it's never about doing enough. It's about doing what's right and what's within our power to do. So Jesus responds to the question. The question was, who is my neighbor? And as Jesus often does, he uses a parable. He tells a story. to address this question, but it's also important to recognize he's addressing two questions. The one is the obvious question of who is my neighbor. The other is less obvious. It's the motive behind the question. It's the why behind the what. The what is who's my neighbor. The why is because I want to be justified. So Jesus, in his mastery of this story, gives an answer to both questions, justification of self and who the neighbor is. So this is what Jesus says in verse 30. In reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now it's interesting to note the journey here is 17 miles between Jerusalem and Jericho. It was known as an especially dangerous pathway or highway. The terrain with rocks and everything provided lots of places for criminals, burglars to hide. And it was well known that this was a dangerous stretch of highway, and it was common for thieves to be here. So this man was beaten and attacked and robbed, left half dead. But then in verse 31, it says, a priest happened to be going down the same road. And when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to that place, saw him and passed by on the other side. So here we see both the priest and the Levite not just pass by the man who was half dead, but pass by on the other side of the road. And likely that is because of the law. The law didn't let priests get near a dead body. Leviticus 21:11 says this, he must not defile himself by going near a dead body. He is a priest. So as a priest maybe saw a half-dead looking person, he wasn't even going to risk it. He wasn't even going to chance going anywhere near that dead body. He passed by on the other side of the road. The same was true for the Levite. The Levites' jobs were to work in the temple, and they would have also had this law in mind. I'm not going to go near that. But the Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. So here in the story, there's a striking reversal of roles. As Pastor Emily said, the Samaritans and the Jews didn't get along. They actually hated each other. And there's a lot of historical reasons why with worship and with things that happened in the past. So the Jewish listener, the one who was hearing this, would have probably easily put themselves in the position of the good person. But to the Jew, there was no such thing as a good Samaritan. They were all bad. So here, the Jew could have pictured, well, I would go down the highway, I would see a Samaritan in need, and I would help them because I'm the good person. But Jesus reverses the roles in order to drive home his point, to remove these preconceived notions about people and about what they should be doing. You know, the priest and the Levite potentially were justified in their actions because of the law, right? We just said they couldn't go near a dead body. They were potentially justified by it. But that same law, when boiled down to its core, said to love your neighbor as yourself. So were they justified or not? And I think that their justification of the law was actually in their mind, but it was an excuse. It was an excuse for them not to help that person. And that's exactly the point that I want to get after this morning, is that we do that stuff all the time. We try to justify our actions all the time. It's everywhere. My kids are here this morning. Sometimes, maybe at the end of a long day or long week, I'll say something that was possibly not right. Maybe I'm a little upset or frustrated, and I'll snap or yell, and I'm sorry for that, guys. But it's so easy for me to justify that. Well, it's been a long day. Well, if they weren't so annoying, I wouldn't have responded that way. It's easy to do. You know, we do it when we go to work, right? Hey, I took the stairs today instead of the elevator. It was only one flight of stairs. But I took the stairs, and so I get the donut, right? We justify our actions. I'm headed home from work. It's not in my budget and it's not in my diet, but it's been a day, so here we come, McDonald's. Like, we justify all of our actions all the time. You know, we do it at work too, like, oh, this big organization, it's got tons of money, but they didn't give me a raise this year, and so I'll cut out a little early. I'll show up a little late. I'll slack off a little bit. We justify our actions all the time. You know, if they wanted me to work hard, they would have paid me more. We do it every day, even in our spiritual walk. I know I'm supposed to be praying, God, I know, but you know I'm busy. We justify it all. I'm supposed to be serving, I'm supposed to give, but I don't make enough. I don't do this, I don't do that. I justify all of it. We do it day after day after day. Even in our relationships, husbands and wives. A husband or a wife will think they deserve something from their spouse. Anytime we think we deserve anything, we're walking into a dangerous place. Because if we think we deserve it and it's not given, we're going to seek to find it on our own. We're going to look for it and try to fulfill it apart from our spouse. And what does that do? It desecrates trust. It desecrates, destroys intimacy. It blows up budget. It destroys marriages. But we justify, I deserve that. I should have that. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't have boundaries. We should have boundaries. We should have healthy boundaries. But the answer to self-justification is given in the story. It's in selfless, generous, abundant love. Love that puts others first. So we read the story and we understand that the man gave money to the innkeeper. Studies have been done that that amount of money in today's dollars would have probably paid for 2 months worth of a hotel stay. Now some people say, well, yeah, you had to account for food and other expenses, so maybe it would have covered a month for this man to recover. It's still a month. That's a long time that this person just gave out of his own pocket. Not to mention that he put him on his own donkey, poured wine on his own wounds. That was an expense. The bandages that he put on this man probably came from his own clothing. He probably ripped them out of his own cloak and wrapped him in those things. This is generous. This is abundant. This is more than was ever expected by that person. He could have just, well, let me just get him into the city and I'll just leave him at the city gate and someone else can help. That would have probably been the minimum thing for a Samaritan and a Jew to interact with. He went above and beyond. He was generous. So often we ask, how little can I do and still be justified in my actions? But the whole point of the law is it's not about any rule or regulation or about how little I can do. It's about love. And love should not be limited by its object. Love should not be limited by its object. You know, the Samaritan, he didn't say, well, that Jew should have known that this was a dangerous part of the highway. If he couldn't defend himself, he shouldn't have been traveling along here. He should have brought some buddies to help him to make sure he wasn't attacked. He didn't justify his actions based on that guy. His love was under his own control to give, under his own authority. So the quality and the control of your love is in your hands. It's not dependent upon the object. And think about that in relation to God with us. I am so thankful that God's love was not limited by us in our filth, in our idolatry, in our sinfulness, our selfishness. He did not limit his love. I quoted this verse last week, but I'll quote it again. I love this verse, Romans 5:8. But God proves his love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. He did not limit his love. And love is demonstrated by action. By action. And again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have boundaries. We should have healthy relationships. Sometimes that tough love mentality does need to be put in place, and all that stuff is going to happen. And I'm not talking about perfection, and I'm not talking about not having grace. Grace is important. We need grace. You need grace. I need grace. We all need grace. I'm not talking about grace. I'm talking about love. Love. I'm talking about those moments when in our heart of hearts, at the deepest part of us, we know what we're supposed to do, and we don't do it. We justify our actions when we should have and could have had the opportunity to live and love like Jesus. At the heart of what I'm saying is James chapter 4, verse 17. If anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, for it is sin for them. So I believe what we're seeing here is the unfolding of the lawyer's understanding of the law. This process of rules and regulations to receiving permission from Jesus to be guided by love. That's the same permission that we have, to be guided by love. The conclusion of the story is at verse 36. Jesus says, "Which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise." So the answer to the question, who is the neighbor? The neighbor, our neighbors, are those who need us when it is in our power to help them. And what about this question of justification? Justifying ourselves. Well, as I said in the beginning, I think when we feel the need to justify our actions, it's inherently admitting that we know we were wrong. And the answer to that question is generous, abounding, selfless, godly love. The call to love God is the call to love others. And the best way to serve God is to serve others. Pastor Leah, could I have you come? So the next time you feel, and my hope is that, when you buy a new car, let's say you bought a Jeep, all of a sudden everywhere you go, you see Jeeps. You've heard of that? It's like that, there's a name for it. But my hope is, with this idea of justification of your actions, that now that I've drawn your attention to it, that everything you do, you'll start to see, oh, I'm justifying my action or inaction based on my desire or not desire to do something that I know I should do deep down inside. And again, I'm not suggesting that you have to be perfect. It's not about legalism. It's about love. It's about love. And you'll always find an excuse not to love. But love is not limited by its object. So ask yourself the question, what kind of person do you want to be? What kind of person do I want to be? What kind of church do we want to be? What kind of God are you representing when you walk into your workplace? When you walk into your school? When you walk into your home? I want to be a person that doesn't make excuses. Excuses. I'm done with excuses. I'm not going to try to justify myself. It's time to get serious about love. About love. And so this morning as we close, I want to give you a few minutes. If you're with your family, you can do this together. But I have a few questions I want to just reflect on now. These are just a starting point. But a few thoughts to think about and pray about. The first one is, our neighbors are those who need us when it is in our power to help them. Who needs me to be their neighbor this week? Where have I sought to justify my actions and know that I am wrong? How can I apply love God and love others to that situation? Love is not limited by its objects. Where have I limited my love? And then ask God for his help. Take a few minutes to pray and reflect, and then I'm going to close us in prayer.
Waiting here for you with our hands lifted high in praise. And it's you